So this next panel, our first full panel that's going to kick off today, is something really special to me. I got to experience this firsthand, and it's life-altering. For years I heard Sean and some of my other friends talk about surf therapy, and I didn't really know what it was, and the hype and the buzz was out there. Finally, last year, I got out there. I wanted to go and see what it was all about. And let me tell you, it's so emotional. I was telling Sean from AWOW that he's got to get sponsored by Kleenex because there's not a dry eye on the beach. It's incredible, You see these kids with disabilities and parents who are, living with these challenges on a day-to-day basis. But when these kids hit the water, they change. It's just a really amazing thing. And I'm not going to steal the thunder from Ryan, but healthy oceans is more than just for our economy, but they are also important to other individuals and young people and everything. And that's why I wanted to bring this panel together. I think sometimes surf therapy gets overlooked, and I want us to all learn how impactful it really is to our community. So we have my good friend Ryan Ashton. He's the Vice President of Development at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and he's going to be leading this panel with us. So please welcome Ryan Ashton.
All right. Well, thank you, Vipe, and thank you all for being with us this morning. We're excited to share our conversation with you about this topic of surf therapy. So our goal for the next half hour is to discuss how surf therapy is changing the lives of its beneficiaries, as well as the important role that ocean conservation plays in its existence, and vice versa. How can surf therapy events promote ocean conservation and inspire action? So I'm pleased to introduce our very well-rounded panel. Sitting next to me, we have Kris Primacio. Kris was recently program manager of the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation, a surf therapy program serving veterans and at-risk youth since 2005. She currently serves as CEO of the International Surf Therapy Organization, which is a nonprofit partnering surf therapy organizations together to promote global use and recognition of surf therapy through understanding, sharing, and advocacy. They utilize partnerships to promote surf therapy to improve mental health. So welcome, Kris.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next to Kris, we have Sean Swentek. Sean is a passionate advocate for disadvantaged and vulnerable populations with 20 years of service in nonprofits working on behalf of children in need. He currently serves as the executive director of A Walk on Water, which is a 501c3 nonprofit providing surf therapy to families of children with special needs. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Ryan.
And we also have with us Steve Mount. Steve is a Southern California native and a 22-year United States Marine Corps veteran. He is here to add his personal insight and perspective on the benefits of surf therapy for our servicemen and women. So, welcome, Steve. Now, before I start asking questions of our panelists, I do want to share just a quick story about my own personal introduction to surf therapy. Now, as a surfer myself, I've always considered surfing as my own personal form of therapy, whether I have a bad day or want to clear my mind, dealing with any stresses in life. It's usually easy to overcome that with a paddle out and catching a few waves. And any of you in here who are surfers yourselves probably understand where I'm coming from when I say that. But back in 2007 is when I realized that the ocean could provide much more in terms of therapy. And I recall reading an article that was describing a study that had been published in the New England Journal of Medicine. And it was describing in the study, it was describing the benefits of inhaling saltwater vapor and the positive benefits that this had on patients with cystic fibrosis. And I was really kind of blown away by that. I'd never heard of this before, that the ocean in and of itself was actually a treatment, a form of therapy for patients with cystic fibrosis. And the way they conducted the study is that they actually were observing surfers with cystic fibrosis and seeing that they were having positive outcomes when they were coming back in from a surf session. If you're not familiar with what cystic fibrosis is, it's a kind of a genetic mutation disorder that severely affects the lungs or the digestive system. And so patients with cystic fibrosis have an excessive buildup of mucus in their lungs, and it makes it hard for them to breathe, and there's a number of treatments that they have to go through. But here we are talking about the ocean water, surfing in and of itself as a way to treat these individuals. And I was blown away by that. So at the time, I worked for Quicksilver, and we sponsored surf camps up and down the coast, and we got in touch with one of our surf camp operators in Santa Monica, and we got together with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and another nonprofit called the Malleola Foundation, and we were able to pull together about a dozen families that had children with cystic fibrosis, and we brought them out to the beach, and we had the most incredible afternoon. It was so amazing. It was a life-changing event for me personally to be there on the beach and to see these kids in the water, not only catching waves, but getting a treatment session at the same time, coming out of the water and being able to breathe easier because they're rehydrating their lungs because of the saltwater vapor. It was amazing, and to see the parents and the families of these kids, in tears and just in awe, and seeing their children come to life and play, and having the most amazing day on the beach was something that I'll never forget. And so I just wanted to share that because I also think it leads into our conversation today and into my first question that I have here for the panel, which is, why do you think ocean water surf therapy is so powerful and life-altering? And I'd like to start that off with you, Steve. I think you can probably best address this question.
Yeah, thanks Ryan, and thanks for having me here today. Probably asking, like, why is this Marine up here talking about surf therapy? Well, I'm a Marine Corps helicopter pilot by trade, and in 2004, I was flying in Iraq, the city of Najaf, with my wingman, and we were coming around to engage some enemy, and our helicopter was hit by ground fire. So the ground fire came up, hit our helicopter, blew up our #1 engine. One of the rounds hit me in the head. So the round came in, transited through behind the bridge of my nose, through my right eye socket, and then out my right temple. Our helicopter then went down into this cemetery that was adjacent towards the enemy forces that we were engaged with at the time. Luckily, our wingman, our other helicopter, was able to protect us for a while until the ground forces came in and picked me up, and we were evac'd out of the city, and then eventually medevac'd back here to the United States. So that was the day that was the end of my flying career, right? Not a whole lot of demand for one-eyed pilots in the Marine Corps, but I was able to kind of pivot my career in the Marines and continue to serve for another 15 or so years until I finally retired as a 22-year Marine Corps veteran and give back to our younger guys. But specifically for me, and why surfing is passionate with me is, during my recovery, I found that being in the water and and surfing was, with only one eye, I had to get used to a different perception of the world, a different depth perception of how things would come at me, and then my vestibular system was a little bit out of whack, and so surfing, not only did it help me clear my mind, like Ryan said, hey, if you have a good day, a good session in the morning, no matter what happens at work, it's going to be a good day. But physically for me, it helped me with my balance, helped me with my vestibular system, and just being in the water and being around other like-minded individuals aided in my recovery. And then I was really fortunate then, fast forward my career a few years, to be able to pass that knowledge on and pass that kind of experience with surf therapy on to some younger Marines, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But, without the love of the ocean, so often Navy medicine or the VA just tries to fill you full of drugs. And we want to try to get away from that and get towards natural therapies, outdoor therapy, surf therapy. And it really was a life-changing thing for me to get back on my feet and realize that I could still do the things that I did before my injury, just in a different manner.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Sean, do you want to add anything there?
No. Kind of hard. Thanks for asking me to follow that. Steve, thank you for your service and for what you do. I know you didn't get too much into the lives you've now impacted through giving back to all the wounded vets that you've helped change their lives too. It's really amazing what you do. I don't want to add too much more to that. I think for me, when we talk about why we're here today and the importance of clean waterways, I know Vipe kind of mentioned, it's not about the economic impact. I would kind of argue that surf therapy does have a beneficial economic impact on the people that we serve and the nation at large in the world, because for me, at least in my mind, we're altering the direction of the lives of the people we serve. And so if a child has never been in the ocean, has never experienced surf therapy, and that changes their life in a way that improves it, to where it improves their behavioral skills, their understanding of the world. We have kids that learn how to speak after surfing, or not learn, but started speaking. So there are lives that are completely changed directionally that in the end is probably going to benefit the economy and improve the workforce and improve the outcomes of these individuals. And someone like Steve is a little more at the tip of the spear, and he's changing lives of 18 to 30-year-old young men and women who would probably go a really horrible direction otherwise, and he's directly contributing to the economic impact by putting people back into the workforce who can be productive, healthy contributors to the world. So I would just say that absolutely what we're doing has an economic impact in a positive way, I would hope. And that's really what I want to tie this into, is that surf therapy is absolutely real therapy, and that's something that Kris will talk about later with her efforts through ESTO and what she's trying to prove out. But that therapy does have a benefit to the economy, I believe, and I think we'll find that as this grows.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said. Thank you both for sharing that. Kris, anything else?
Yeah, I can't add to that. I'm not even going to try.
So a big theme, obviously, of why we're all here today is to talk about ocean conservation and how we are here to take action and inspire action. So, can we talk a little bit about why are clean waterways and oceans, so important to you personally and to your organizations?
Want me to go again? Sure.
Yeah.
We had like a little outline before.
Yeah.
So we're like looking at
It's all
each
right.
other
We
as
talked
to
about
who's
it.
gonna go. The cold reality is, for some of our kids who are immunocompromised, literally if the ocean is not clean, they cannot participate in surf therapy. They cannot benefit from surf therapy. I have a number of athletes where the parents call me the night before, hey, we looked at the water report at that beach. It's not acceptable for our kids to go in. And that's really heartbreaking for me. So obviously that's the super important thing right there about the clean waterways. I think the bigger thing, at least in my perception, is a lot of the families we serve live inland. They drive 3-4 hours to the beach to come to the events. A lot of these families have never even been to the beach, been in the ocean, let alone surf. What we're doing is opening up minds to the power of the ocean, the power of water in our lives. And we're really changing their perception of how their role is in protecting those waterways and why it's important to them, because they ultimately see the medical benefit and the therapeutic benefit on their child. So for me, I was thinking about this as, I'm sorry, I forgot her name, was just speaking earlier. It's like whenever I remember growing up as a kid and hearing don't litter, don't litter, don't litter, it doesn't have the same impact as when you can talk about the positive impact. So it's like if you can, instead of telling people littering is bad, how about saying water and clean oceans are good, and really changing the perception of that? Because when people see the impact it has on them and their family, it creates someone who wants to go back and be a better steward of the world and of the waterways, and make sure that they're not polluting the thing that gives them health. And so I think if we can change the conversation, it's really easy, in my opinion, to convince someone who lives at the beach that dirty ocean is bad. But I've lived now in the foothills of the mountains for the last 4 years, and I see the people up there that are disconnected from it. And so if we can change that conversation and get these people who aren't at the beach all the time to understand the importance of those clean waterways. So I don't know the answer to that. We can't get everyone in the ocean every day, but there's got to be a way to change the conversation around that so that people understand the impact of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Sean. I really like what you said about these programs, providing those positive outcomes and introducing young adults who have never really been to the ocean before. And I think we all can share the same thought that if you're touching, if you have your hands on, if you're in the water, if you're experiencing the magic of the ocean. You want to protect it. You want to do something to make sure it prospers. You want to become that steward of the environment. So it's providing those types of tangible opportunities that I think really helps opens people's eyes up to what's important in terms of ocean conservation. Kris, anything you want to add to that?
Well, the International Surf Therapy Organization, we're promoting programs from all around the world to work together to raise the bar, to risk management and ethics and changing the standards. of surf therapy programs. And I think our largest contribution, our most significant contribution, is that we're facilitating outcome research on that efficacy of surf therapy. In other words, we've got researchers all around the world who are IRB approved, running randomized controlled trials, conducting research and collecting data. And the evidence is clear. And it just doesn't matter if you are a veteran ailing from PTSD or depression, if you're a child on the autism spectrum, or an at-risk youth who's struggling with trauma, depression, even abuse. Whatever ails you, if you go surfing, you'll feel better. And that's kind of the magic of surfing and the power behind the ocean. I mean, it's that it does not discriminate. You know, the ocean, we bring everybody down. It doesn't care about the size of your house, the car you drive, the amount of money you have, the college you went to, and it certainly doesn't care about your gender or the color of your skin. The moment you get in the water, it's the great equalizer. And so we're talking about so many populations across the globe and different marginalized communities, and we all come into the water and we're the same. So I think that's really the power that's happening in the ocean.
Yeah. Well said. Steve, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just one quick thing, like Kris said. I mean, we're all come from different backgrounds, right? And that's kind of one of the fun things I found with working with veterans and servicemen and women. They come from all over America. All different walks of life, and the Marine Corps, the Army, the Navy kind of unite them. And now, if we introduce them to this love of surfing and the love of the water, they're going to take that back to their communities and be our advocates out there for making real change if we ingrain them with the love of the ocean and their clean waterways. So it's a definite good relationship to have with that whole generation of young people all across America.
And old people.
And old.
Some of us, we do not want to discriminate.
So let's see here. Kris, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening within the surf therapy sector? What steps are your organizations that you're working with taking towards ocean conservation?
Well, the International Surf Therapy Organization, right now we're representing 5 continents and over 35 countries. But the waterways that we're using, right, we're using the North and South Atlantic Ocean, we're using the North and South Pacific Ocean, the Indian Oceans. We're not yet in the Arctic Ocean or the Southern Ocean, but any day now, Greenland and Antarctica, we're going to discover surf therapy. But besides that, we're utilizing the Mediterranean Sea, the Philippine Sea, the North Sea, the Caribbean Sea, and gosh, about a dozen more, including rivers and lakes. So it's really, there is no surf therapy without clean, healthy waterways, right? And we're utilizing all of them. So I think as far as regular programming, to speak to what Stephen just said, we kind of do this roundabout, beautiful way of bringing people to discover the love of the ocean. And actually to reiterate what Sean said, they fall in love with the ocean because they're seeing it for their very eyes. It's tangible for them. It's happening. Not all of us can go dive underwater and see the coral reefs that are being bleached and the depletion of our fish and waterways, but you can see kids smiling from ear to ear when they're surfing. And so that's what's happening. And we have this very unique opportunity where we're bringing thousands of people down to the beach, and they're getting to witness that and then fall in love with the ocean. And my eternal optimism that will always be, I believe we take care of what we love. And if you can bring sort of that roundabout way of having people consider the ocean and consider the beaches because they've now fallen in love with it, and again, seen the therapeutic benefits to it. So I think that's what's very unique about surf therapy and all of the waterways that we're touching, and then also the thousands of people we're bringing down to the beach, which is much more unique than many other organizations. We're bringing people down to surf.
Sure.
So, they don't realize that now suddenly they care about the ocean because they want to surf in it and they don't want trash. And so it's very unique, I think, perspective.
Absolutely is, yeah. As I was thinking about, the surf, all the organizations and all the great work that's happening on the beach and kind of this family atmosphere that occurs at these surf therapy events, right now I work at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and there's a exhibit that we have called our watersheds, and it's an exhibit that talks about how all the watersheds here in Southern California are connected and ultimately drain into the Pacific Ocean. So it's a way for students and young adults to come in and press a button and see kind of rainfall and watch kind of the water travel through various waterways. And the reason I'm saying that is because it makes me think of the connection within the surfing community and this family atmosphere, this camaraderie, if you will, of people coming together. It reminds me of how our waterways are connected in that sense. And so, Steve, can you describe a little bit about your observation on the camaraderie aspect of these events and the surfing community coming together to support what you're doing with the Wounded Warriors?
Definitely. Especially for Wounded Warriors and just the veteran community as a whole, right? We're very much of a brotherhood or sisterhood already in the service. So guys that get out, isolation is the enemy, right? If they isolate from their community, then bad things can happen and they can take a spiral down. And so this community of surfers, this community of surf therapy brings them back together again. You're in the lineup with guys from every walk of life. You have CEOs and businessmen, you have junior college students, everyone in between, and you're talking about life, you're talking about surfing, and these veterans are kind of getting good connections through that, right? I think all of us probably in this room have had that day where, you don't want to go out, you don't want to paddle out, right? Or you don't want to go on that run or that hike because you're feeling the weather, maybe it's a little drizzly or cold, right? But you don't want to let your friends down. And so you end up showing up, and it's the power of showing up, and then your friends reinforce you, that community reinforces you, and you end up having a great session, right? You're like, hey man, that was awesome. Thanks for having me come out. And it's just another community that I think is a perfect extension from their life in the service to now a different way to give back and through surf therapy, and maybe they now get this love for the ocean and they give back and they teach other people as well. But that community, I think, is just such a natural fit for our veteran community because the fact that they are so longing for connections now that they've left the service.
Sure. Yeah. Sean, Kris, do you want to add anything to that as well?
No, I mean, the one thing to your earlier question about what is the surf therapy community doing about clean waterways, because Kris mentioned, and not in hyperbole, we're bringing sometimes 1,000 people to the beach, and 1,000 people bring trash, right? So at least for Walk on Water, and I also sit on the board of ESA, so I can speak a little bit to that, but I know for us, for Walk on Water, one of our main missions this year is to get carbon neutral or carbon negative at our events, and so we're working with Stokes certified events. We have a really keen eye this year on limiting the impact on the environment that we have, or really making it positive on the environment, because when you're bringing all these people to the beach, there's an opportunity to leave the beach worse than when you got there, and that's why anytime you go to an AWOW event, we say that in the morning we leave the beach better than when we arrived. And so I think if everyone who goes to the beach can really have that mindset, we can improve from the beach out. But I still think it really goes back to the inland communities and educating people who are not close to the water. Like Kris said, until you are really getting that love for the water, experiencing a therapeutic benefit from it, it's hard to have a connection to. And it doesn't have to just be an ocean, like Kris said, rivers, lakes, all these different things. Wallace J. Nichols will talk ad nauseum about the fact that all water is beneficial. Water is medicine, he always says. And so just getting people into the water more often is really the goal. And I think that'll improve outcomes holistically.
Absolutely. So, Kris, question for you. So how many surf therapy organizations take action on the beach to advance clean beaches and clean oceans as part of their regular programming?
Well, to what Sean said, I mean, we have a moral obligation or a responsibility when bringing all of these people down to the beach to educate them. But, we've got recycle bins. We do a lot of the programs, almost all of them now, do not hand out single-use water bottles. We have water stations. Walk on Water does a really great job with water stations. And it's just that exposure and that paying attention to, hey, you just brought hundreds and hundreds of people down to the beach. And as Sean said, we could leave it worse, but and that will directly affect the ability to continue to do surf therapy programs. So, across the board, our messaging is leave the beaches, and the ocean's better than you found it. And so we'd like to believe that that's happening, because beach cleanups are happening before, after, and during. And so, again, it's exposure to marginalized communities, underdeveloped countries that wouldn't normally be at the beach anyway. And now we're exposing them to the therapeutic benefits of it and why we need to keep it clean. So, yeah, that's happening worldwide.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Sean, another question for you. So what benefits do your constituents see in a safe and clean ocean?
Yeah, I mean, I think I spoke to this a little bit earlier. I probably jumped ahead, but obviously, it's really important that when you're out in the ocean, if you're swimming next to a piece of trash, it's going to negatively impact your experience and probably be an eye opener for you. So I think, as we've all just said multiple times, it's the fact that once you feel the water around you and you're in it and you're immersed in it and you understand because you see trash around you, because you literally can't go to any Southern California beach and not see trash now. It's horrible. You get it, At that point, you're like, oh, this is coming from me and the people around me and my community. And so that's really what's important, I think, is opening people's eyes to the end result of their initial, lack of proper disposal of trash.
Great. So Steve, another question for you. So why do you feel outdoor therapy, and specifically surf therapy, is an important aspect of physical and mental recovery and healing for our veterans and service members?
Well, for the past 2 years, as the commanding officer of the Wounded Warrior Battalion down at Camp Pendleton, surf therapy was actually part of our multidisciplinary approach to healing, both mentally and physically, for these young men and women. And not just surf therapy, like you said, Ryan, like getting them outdoors, getting them into the sunshine. It's important because as humans, right, we strive to be outdoors, I think, and sunshine is good for us, vitamin D, right? And really the tangible things that we saw with this population was reduction in drug use, reduction in antidepressant needs, and then that's kind of a cycle, right? They get on more antidepressants, then they gain weight, then they don't want to be outside, and they don't want to go be active again, and so they take more antidepressants, and it's a bad cycle, right? So if we can break that cycle with either surf therapy or skiing or hiking, get them off those antidepressants, get them back and healthy again. We saw several guys that Kris and I surf with, lose 40, 50, 60 pounds.
Amazing.
Just for their love of the water and the love of the ocean. They want to get out there and they want to be active. So we're getting them off these antidepressants. The second is sleep medications. A lot of these veterans are going through some things in their mind, either with post-traumatic stress, and they need medication to sleep or to quiet those demons that are going on in their head. And if we get them out into the ocean, into the outdoors, and it helps purge those thoughts. And now they're sleeping without the aid of medication. And again, if we can get them off these medications and out into the physical environment, it gets their bodies tired, it gets their minds tired, it gets their minds focused on something that's not their problems. And I think that just enhances overall their benefit to society as a whole, and now us as a military community are doing a service to our society by handing these young men and women back, and hopefully in a better state, but at least in a non-as degraded state. And that's either through surf therapy or outdoor therapy.
Absolutely.
A big advocate of everything outdoors.
Outdoors, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get outside.
That's right. Get outside. Put that game station away, right? And get outside.
Game station.
I don't even know the right PlayStation.
You can tell he
sorry.
spends his time outdoors.
Yeah, you do. I would like to add to that, we also wear them out. That is why
That's right.
they fall asleep. I mean, it is exhausting. And if you haven't surfed at Del Mar Jetty, we get some 6 to 8
Excellent
foot
point,
waves
Jen.
out there.
Excellent point,
And it
yeah.
is exhausting. So besides the fact that it quiets their mind, which of course is one of the benefits of surfing,
Yeah.
they're tired.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
That's right.
Yep, it's a big day. Those events, it's all hands on deck.
Yeah.
As I saw, I was at Sean's event this last Saturday, and it was a tremendous event that he pulled together down in Newport Beach. So before I have about one more question that I want to ask the panel, but before I do that, I do want to open it up to any questions from the audience. Kind of getting closer to our time. Is there any questions? Yes.
I'll take a shot. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, for a walk on water, we have always said leave the beach cleaner than when we arrive, but this year we're getting super intentional about it, and we went through this huge grading system with Stoke Events last year. They come out and put together a 20-page PowerPoint on all the things we're doing right and all the things we're doing wrong and how we can improve all those things. So yeah, for us, there is a third element this year that's vital to us, which is to completely improve our carbon footprinting and get to a place that we're actually benefiting the environment. I don't know that that's necessarily in place for all organizations, but like Kris said, every surf therapy organization naturally has an inclination towards keeping their oceans clean. So I think going forward, I'm sure Easto, you'll start hearing more about that being an important part of what we do is preaching that. I know just the more that Kris and I come to conferences like this, it's just more top of mind. Because it is sometimes difficult to get, we just get focused on the outcomes of our people because what we're doing is so important on that regard. But like we've all said, we can't do it without clean waterways. So for us, it really needs to be like a 1A,
Yes, right over here.
Are you guys seeing individual?
Yeah, I guess I can speak to that. That's happening, absolutely. And I think because, to Todd's point, there's so many beneficiaries to surf therapy, right? We're not talking about just the athletes and the participants. We're talking about the volunteers and everybody that's on the beach, even the sponsors. So not only are surf therapy programs, through the International Surf Therapy Organization, which we're really proud of, I think our greatest achievement is that we've brought the community together to work together. Our mantra is go far, go together, but the idea is that we're coming together to expose surf therapy to not just one another, but to other parts of, I guess, the world. And so what's happening is a lot of surf therapy programs now are talking to each other. What are you doing? I mean, again, we're promoting, we're raising the bar. So we're promoting best practices. And by doing so, we've got all of these people who attend. I for one, I've volunteered at almost 12 surf therapy programs in the past year and a half. And by doing so, not only am I learning some new things, but I too am exposed to the benefits of being around it. But then I talk about it. And I think that's the big part about it. To Sean's point, to Stephen's point, we want to connect. We all want to feel like we're a part of a community. And by going around and exposing more surf therapy, we then, in turn, the ancillary effect is that we are exposed to the elements of the ocean, right? And that need to protect it. So that's definitely happening. Yeah, it's sort of organic. I hate that word. It's a little overused, but that is definitely happening.
Yeah, and anecdotally, kind of a grassroots kind of thing, one of the Marines who I surfed with up at the base, I was paddling in, or coming in on a different spot farther south from the base, and I saw him on the beach. And he wasn't surfing that day. He just had a bag, and he was walking up and down by the cliffs and picking up trash. Right? And so it was totally unsolicited. I'm like, hey, Mike, what are you doing? He's like, I wasn't surfing today, so I just have my coffee, and I have this bag, and I'm walking up and down the cliff, picking up trash, right? And would he have done that already without being introduced? I don't know. I mean, that's just an anecdote. But if that one Marine is going to make that change, maybe now he's talking to his friends, and instead of, sitting up on the bluff in your van and tossing out your beer cans, right? You're doing the opposite. You're going and you're picking up other people's cans, or you're picking up other people's wrappers on that day that you're not going to paddle out because it's too small or windblown or whatever. But that's just a quick anecdote.
One other thing I would add is we're also trying to make sure the partners that we work with are cognizant of the importance of clean waterways, and we won't partner with someone just because we need the money if they're not doing things the right way. We've had vendors that we work with year over year where we instruct them not to package their product the way they did the year before, and they're like, well, that's what we use. We said, you got to find something else or you're not going to be able to partner with us. And it's amazing when people realize that they have to do something differently, how they come up with solutions that are better for the environment. So we try to do a little bit of that. I mean, obviously as a nonprofit, it's very difficult for us to say we're not going to take your money, but we try our best to really educate our partners as we work with them.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sean. Yes, question.
Kris, I found it interesting that you mentioned that you guys are doing trials that show that
Randomized control trials, yes.
I'm curious, as people get more educated about alternative ways of healing ourselves and maybe trying to get away from more of a pharmaceutical approach, is this something that we could see in the future being something that my Blue Shield would offer to me?
Oh, thank you.
For sure.
I'll pay you later. I did not set him up.
good lead-in.
That is a part of our broader vision, is that we are creating a world where healthcare practitioners accept and acknowledge surf therapy as an evidence-based form of care. And we know that they will not, unless we have data, unless we have the research to prove it. In turn, that would mean healthcare providers insure surf therapy. And one of the randomized controlled trials that are happening is from a researcher who received a $1 million grant from the US Navy. So in turn, what's happening with that is not only, a grant to study surf therapy. So what's happening is essentially the US Navy is now prescribing surf therapy because that's part of the program. So it's starting to happen. And by the way, there actually have been trials in France not too long, a couple years ago. They did a 12-week trial with about 12 different young kids, boys and girls, and half of them went off their meds, and half of them reduced their meds significantly. So it's happening, and that is the International Surf Therapy Organization's broader vision. Absolutely. And also, I'm just going to quickly, universities, it's happening. We do have the first ever researcher earning a PhD in surf therapy. We are working with him, but we are looking to a world where universities start acknowledging surf therapy, and our groms today can go earn degrees in surf therapy. So yeah, we're on the precipice of this.
Absolutely.
So very exciting. Thanks for asking that.
And it already is prescribable in some countries
Yes.
and covered by insurance. And I mean, there's people in this audience that can talk to you about some ways in America that they've figured out how to get
Yeah.
insurance to cover it.
Yeah,
I was
through
gonna say-
physical therapists.
I was gonna say, Jill probably tapped you on the shoulder for that question.
Yeah. No, good question.
But yeah, that's certainly that's the dream scenario in the
Yeah,
future.
the recognition of surf therapy. So physical therapists, rec therapists, occupational therapists through their license and much appreciated, respected licenses of going to school for 6 to 7 to 8 years and earning a license to practice therapy or be a therapist, I guess is how I should put it. But surf therapy isn't quite recognized yet, but we're working towards that. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, good question. Anybody else? Yes, in the back.
Kris and I spoke the other day, and I know she's affiliated with Ways and Change.
Yeah,
Purpose. I don't know.
absolutely. And so,
Change is amazing.
yeah, so we did speak yesterday, and she's joining the ISTO team. She doesn't know that yet, but but we spoke yesterday about that. And so to answer that question, it is happening. A lot of the organizations very much are focused on our at-risk youth and our marginalized communities. And so to answer that, and it's actually one of our questions, so I'm just going to answer it now because it's my
go right
favorite
ahead,
thing.
Kris. Yep, go right ahead.
98% of the organizations working with International Surf Therapy or ISTO are non-profit. So what that means is we are offering our services for free. By offering our services for free, we are exposing people who would never otherwise have access or means to get not just to the ocean, but certainly access and means to a surfboard, to a wetsuit, and a very expensive surf instructor. And it is very expensive to have a surf instructor. And so we are exposing all of these human beings to something that they wouldn't otherwise have exposure to. And by doing so, again, back to, falling in love with the ocean and taking care of what you love, this exposure to our kind of marginalized areas in our communities, it's just, the benefits are over the top as far as we're not just talking about surfers and we're not just talking about the participants. We are talking about the beneficiaries, like a parent who now has a child who has less seizures because he surfs, or a sibling who has a brother or sister who is now calmer in a world that is pretty chaotic because they went surfing that day. And even more importantly, our veterans. We have spouses from the veteran community whose husbands and wives are no longer planning their suicide because they went surfing. They're planning the next time they're going to go surfing. So if that's not, a testimonial to loving and taking care of what you love and the benefits of surfing, but that is happening. That's what's so beautiful about the International Surf Therapy Organization bringing everybody together is we've now discovered there is not a population not being served between blind, paraplegics, quadriplegics, mental, physical disadvantages, and certainly marginalized communities. It's just there's not a population not being served. And I had 2 organizations reach out to me just the other day, and they both want to serve our emergency service men and women. So our EMTs, our firemen, our policemen. That was an underserved population. And gosh, 2 people, one in the United States, one in the UK. I'm like, on the same day? Did you 2 talk? And they didn't, and I put them together. And so now they're working towards that. There's a lot of populations being served.
Wonderful. Yes, in the back.
So I know the organization, like the veterans, some guys that are physical limitations, there's a little calm harbor over there on the base as well, and they do stand-up. So, we give them the option to be able to do stand-up if they're not a whitewater surfer or a green wave surfer, for the veterans, at least at Camp Pendleton.
Yeah, I mean, we have boogie boards at our event. We'll really, it's just about getting people in the water. Todd mentioned Best Day Foundation. They take kids kayaking. They do all sorts of. It's just about getting in and around bodies of water. Absolutely. So we welcome. Half the volunteers for Walk on Water are not surfers because they're operating on the beach and helping kids get in and out of wetsuits and things of that nature. So you don't have to be a surfer to be involved in this community at all.
Yeah.
Although I'd welcome you to try it.
Yeah, I started surfing when I was 41. You can surf.
right.
I think the other thing
way
about
to
surf
start.
therapy is that we take a structured method of surfing. So very often either we've got people boogie boarding the back of the surfboard so they are giving the participants or the athletes the stability, and or many of the programs, including a Walk on Water, they actually stand up with their surfers on the back of the boards and they're holding their surfers. So there are structured methods of surfing where you can go and learn how to surf. So go surf.
And we got time for one more question? If anybody else? Yes.
I have this question that I don't know exactly how to ask, but going in that direction, and do you think that that would be possible?
Did you plant her too?
Yeah, planted all of my people today. Wow.
Taking this one, Kris?
No, I mean, yes. Here, like I said, we actually won't get to our healthcare practitioners unless we bring them the evidence, and so.
So what is it? Like, I'm so energized by that thought.
I wish we had the answer.
Yeah, and we're working on that. We are working on that. And I actually just had a meeting with Almirat Suchi's team. If you guys don't know Assemblymember Almirat Suchi, he is the one who not only helped write the bill, but got surfing to be California's state sport. And I just had a meeting with them, and they believe, he asked me, he goes, how far out are we? How far out are we before we start approaching healthcare practitioners? And I said, less than 5 years. And so I gave him some of our information, and he goes, maybe not this January, but the following January, we'll present it to the, that's massive, that's huge. And so it's starting, and there are studies that have been done. They received IRB approval, ethics committee back in the day. More or less, they say, is your methodology helping or hurting the child after they go surfing? And so IRB approvals and randomized control trials are really validating the surfing. And so we have, more of those are happening, and we need more of those to happen in order for us to bring it together. But yes, we're working on that. Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you to our panelists. This has been a lovely discussion, and thank you to our audience for your participation. And we hope you got something out of our conversation this morning. Thank you all.
Thanks, Vibe. Thanks, Vibe.
Isn't that inspirational? I mean, that's exactly the type of conversation that I wanted to have. This panel or this summit should have been sponsored by Kleenex, because I get emotional on this stuff, I swear, it's like, you see these kids and you see these individuals out there, and it's like the smiles on their faces, smiles on their families' faces. It's incredible. And, Sean didn't plug this, but there is an AWOW event on April 20th in Malibu. Sean, am I correct? Yeah, and we'll make sure we post the information on the app, because if you get a chance, you gotta go and see this experience. It's absolutely amazing. And not only are we, talking about healing people through the ocean, but we're also talking about feeding people as well.